can you tell me briefly, like, what was going to an all-boys school like? I'm sure it was different when you went than now, but what were some, like, benefits and maybe drawbacks to that?
Well, I think the benefit is you didn't have the, you didn't have, how do I say this? Let's see. You didn't have the tension that surrounds, dating, boyfriend, girlfriend stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot less concerned about what you look like when you came to school.
Yeah.
There was more physicality in terms of, bouncing people around. I would say there were probably on a per capita basis more physical confrontations, not that there were brawls or anything like that, but
Mm-hmm.
there was more of that. And I think as far as the classrooms were concerned, there was and this was one of the things that people were concerned about, there was a greater willingness on the part of people in an all-boy classroom to speak your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't worry so much about what the other people said because, well, the other thing too was smaller classes, so everybody knew each other pretty well.
Right.
And I think the faculty were a little more freewheeling in the way they could discuss certain topics with an all-boys class.
That's interesting. Like what?
Everything, and from sexual norms to the idea of the role of males and the role of females, and you, I guess one way to look at it, you could see a willingness to discuss biases and
Mm-hmm.
prejudices
Without getting judged.
relative to male-female relationships. In that way, I think there was maybe a greater willingness to be a little self-examining. Yeah, you weren't. I think when girls started, I think that's a lot of this. That's very broken down since then. But when girls started coming to the academy, I think there was a hesitation on the part of boys to speak their minds for a while.
Interesting. Okay, that's cool. So was that one of the bigger changes that you saw? Like, obviously as a teacher, did you watch your classroom dynamics shift a lot?
Yeah. There was having never taught girls, and actually because I went to an all-boys high school and an all-boys college, I went to Notre Dame and was still all male. My teaching and education experience had been almost completely all male. So I was a little unsure as to how that dynamic would be created. Now, one of the things when the school first went co-ed, and I was teaching all high school, most of the girls that came in, not the majority, okay, were girls that had been at CSG.
Oh.
So there was a lot of, people knew each other to some extent anyway.
Okay.
And so there was a little bit more familiarity, but I think as the geographic diversity, in other words, people from all over Central Ohio increased, and girls from different areas, there was, I noticed initially a bit of a reticence of people to talk for fear of what other people might think, more so than when it was all boys. And then I would say by the second or third year that broke down as people became more familiar with having girls in class, the high school. And the girls also had been a little bit, there was that feeling out period, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Okay.
But as people began to know each other a little bit better, then that started to break down. And then I would say it was probably third or fourth year that you really began to sense a female perspective within class that wasn't, I won't say rejected, but wasn't kind of, the boys didn't feel threatened by.
Okay.
And so it was about 3 or 4 years before there really began to be an exchange between the two. And then, of course, as the number of girls increased so that you had greater parity, it was probably 6 or 7 years before you really began to see close to a 50-50 classroom situation. Then I thought the exchange increased. I will say that my economics classes, it took a long time before there was even close to parity as far as female.
Yeah, that doesn't really surprise me.
And
That's interesting.
so that was, I saw it more quickly in the history classes that I taught, let's put it that way, than the econ. But I think it didn't happen overnight, which you wouldn't expect to, but it took a while for the boys to feel comfortable talking with girls, particularly those that had been at academy all the time. Now, of course, we had kids coming in as freshmen and sophomores who were used to having girls in their classroom, and I think that helped too.
Okay. So did you witness any, besides this discomfort, did you witness any obvious forms of sexism or even sort of under the radar?
Well, it's interesting. One of the concerns, it was sort of a sexism based on reverse sexism. There were those that felt that the girls were being, I won't say coddled, but were being given advantages because they were the newbies, and as a result, the boys, a number of boys resisted or complained about that. That if you were a girl, you could get away with anything, and just because we needed to have more girls here because now we were co-ed, and that the boys were quote unquote discriminated against.
That's interesting. Okay.
And I think too, there was a little bit of in an admissions thing, I think the bar was a little higher for boys than girls early on because we wanted to make sure we got more girls in.
You were trying to get more girls,
right.
right? So